Hey guys, subscribe for daily content, and if you're shopping for gear, make sure you check out the description for the newest items at some of the very best online retailers. There's also links for some of the items that I personally recommend. Thanks! What's going on YouTube? Metal Complex here, and today I've got another super interesting knife review / knife overview to share with you guys. This is the Rike and Ketuo RK Shadow, which has an interesting feature. Not just the fact that it looks very Rike, right? Rike has this aesthetic that sort of goes along with a lot of their models that's really cool and definitely stands out, you know, amidst the sea of things that are always the same. But Rike here lately has just been doing really wild stuff, really different stuff, right? Really pushing it for no reason other than just because they can. They are capable of doing weird things. And the weird element with this guy, you'll notice back here there's a little switch. When we push that switch up, the entire back frame comes off, right? Now, I made a YouTube short about this, and I titled it, have you ever seen a knife that can do this? And I intentionally didn't explain it. The comment section is just full of people going, why? I think to a lot of people, it's obvious why this does this, right? It's obvious what's happening here and why Rike is doing this. But to other people, it's not so obvious. So you're going to get a full explanation. But you can kind of see how it comes back together there. And then you just push this down and it is locked completely into place with the blade still completely, fall shut, still centered, still locking out perfectly. Really impressive. This knife should be available right now. So I will have it linked down in the description. You guys can check that out if you want to. It does help my channel when you use those links, but that's entirely up to you. Thanks to Rike / Ketuo for sending this in for me to take a look at. Thanks to my patrons for supporting me. And please make sure to follow me on Instagram at metal_complex. I know some people are going to comment about that, the unsheathing noise, the shing, right? Believe it or not, I went back and forth with a person I thought they were trolling, but I went back and forth with a person on Shorts who was convinced that that was an added sound effect and that I added the sound effect for theatrical, just for theatrics, right? Apparently to that person, the most amazing part of the video, the highlight of the video was the sound effect, and the fact that the thing was unsheathing on the frame was of no interest. I was clearly trying to fabricate the sound. Hasn't everyone taken a shop class? How do you not know that that's just what metal sounds like? Oh man, way too much anime. That's what that'll do to you. If you only ever watch anime, then you get led to the conclusion that that is an exotic sound effect and can only be replicated synthetically. Okay, anyways, I'm sorry. Let's you can still find that conversation. It's still there, by the way, in the short. Let's go ahead and do some size comparisons. So we probably should have it opened up, right? Up against the Ontario Rat Model 1. My eyes are watering. I'm laughing so hard at that. And of course the Ontario Rat Model 2. You can see here that it's a fairly large knife, and probably something that would help out a lot is if I measured it before I did the size comparison. So the RK Shadow is actually coming in at 8.75 inches. The blade length it's really more like 3.85. I mean, you could measure it all the way to 4 inches at the back, but if we go from the tip of the blade to the middle of the frame, it's about 3.85, and then your cutting edge is coming in at almost, now it's a little over 3.25 inches. I'm sorry, not 3.25. That's stupid. 3.75 inches. Sorry about that. How about another size comparison up against the Demco AD 20.5? There we go. How about up against the Spyderco PM2 and the Spyderco Para 3? There we go. And maybe last but not least, let's do the Benchmade Bug Out and the Benchmade Griptilian, or in this case, the Ritter Hogue. How's the action? Well, let me tell you, I've been saying this ever since I handled the Lamella. I've always known that Rike has, had this amazing capability to really go beyond. And I feel like there are a lot of people who really don't understand the level that Rike is on. Their tolerances are ridiculous. This is top tier stuff, and there is no reason that we should not be comparing them directly with Rike. And truthfully, I have seen more impressive things come out of Rike here lately than I have from Rike. I'm not saying that Rike doesn't manufacture a high quality knife, but man, when it comes to technical or complicated machining, right? Parts that are meant to lock in or sort of fit together in unorthodox ways. I mean, at least when it comes to pocket knives, Rike is doing things that I've never seen anybody else do. And you know, as far as I'm concerned, the top 3 Chinese, like super high quality OEMs on earth, right? It's Rike or whoever Rike is, like behind the Rike curtain. I don't know. Maxace, and whoever they are, you know, behind everything, and Rike. They are all distinct though, so to me, it's clear that they're not the same people. This has to be 3 different plants. But Rike, I really think is probably the most impressive. The action is ridiculous, and it's not just the complex machining, but Rike has gotten really good with their detent and, just the overall pivot action. I mean, it is spectacular. This weird thumb spaceship thing that's attached to the blade actually works really well. It is definitely in the cutting path. But as far as deploying the blade, yeah, for sure. Yes, the pocket clip's mounted for tip down. We'll talk about that. I'm going to guess right now. I'm going to guess. There's at least 10 comments already in the comment section. Like, if you're watching this the moment that I upload it, at least 10 people were like, tip down! Ah! I agree. I hate it too. We'll talk about it. But yeah, the action is really great, and it doesn't really matter. Take the thing apart. You can spread the, here, I'll do it for you. Take this thing apart. Look at that magical sound. I'm definitely adding sound effects, right? Just because, like, you have to for... Like, I don't know why I wouldn't. Why would I not? Of course, it's a sound effect, right? Idiots. You can take this thing out here, right? And you can mess with it. You can do whatever, right? As long as you don't unscrew that pivot, which is also the screw holding in the pocket clip, right? And by the way, this knife will still lock out like this, right? Because you can see here, the liner is attached to it. So you could, there we go. Sorry. If you don't move that other frame, right, you can still lock this out this way, and it technically is usable. Yeah. So other people were saying in the short, like, what if that falls off and you lose it? What if any part of any knife ever falls off? And there was another person trying to tell me that this is more parts than a, they're like, that's a bad design because you're just adding more parts. What? More parts. 1, 2, 3, 4 screws, 2 scales, 2 liners. 2 liners, 1 screw, 1 frame, right? No, it's not more parts. And it's also, on that note, if that argument is, going to be recreated, no, you're not any more likely to lose this piece than you are losing any necessary part of this knife, right, during natural use because of the way that this locks out. I'm sure you guys can see. Number 1, it takes a lot of deliberate effort to disengage that. Number 2, this isn't just sitting in there. That's actually sheathing in, right? These little pieces back here and these hooks, it's hooking in and sheathing in a number of different places, and you have to get it exactly right. There we go. And it slides in there. So this isn't like just flopping around, just laying on there. This is locking it in place. It's making it so those hooks cannot release. It's absolutely solid and has no movement whatsoever. Once that's locked in place, short of intentionally moving that back, there really isn't a natural circumstance where you're going to whoops-a-daisy and the thing comes apart without you knowing it, right? Imagine the steps involved with that happening naturally, and you look down and you're like, oh, I lost the back frame of my knife. No, it's not going to happen. But a lot of that is going to involve people actually handling this. You're not going to know until you handle it. You go, oh, wow. Yeah, it's not just, flopping around back there. The action is incredible. It doesn't matter. You can take it apart, put it back together as many times as you want, as long as you don't adjust that pivot screw, which of course can be readjusted. As long as you don't do that, the thing is going to have perfect action, and it's going to lock up completely solid every single time. This is amazing. It is amazing, right? incredible. So the action's great. Let's talk about materials. It's titanium with titanium and M390, right? And that is not the part that's amazing about this knife. That's not the part that's going into the price. I mean, it is a little bit, right? But there's always people who can't see past the materials. So if it's not obvious, when you go and look up the price of this knife, and you're like, that's a lot more expensive than other knives I've seen in titanium and M390. So the part of this that's making it expensive is the crazy machining, the way that it's coming together. It is more expensive to machine things in that way and make every teeny tiny little part of it, right? Get all of these angles correct, machine the pieces correctly so that they all fit together the way that they're supposed to, instead of just doing 2 flat pieces of titanium, attaching them to a blade and using standoffs. One of those processes is going to be substantially more expensive, even if they do it in China, right? But I don't know why I feel obligated to explain that every time. It's probably because there's always people saying, it's just titanium and M390. Anyways, yeah, it's really impressive. It really is amazing. And these are, you know, it's like I said, you kind of have to handle it and experience to kind of get that element. That's the part that's hard, right? Unless you're handling it, unless you're touching it. Most people, there's always that part of it that's just never going to translate perfectly. But you'll just have to take my word for a lot of this stuff. It really is just incredible. The weight on this knife, I'm going to guess it's still under 5 ounces. Maybe I'm wrong. It feels like it's still under 5 ounces. I'm wrong. It's 5.36 ounces, which is still not bad. I mean, it's much larger than, say, a full titanium Hinderer XM18, which weighs over 6 ounces. You're getting a lot longer blade, right? How are they heat treating the M390? I have no idea. Rike, Ketuo, you guys got to list that stuff. You have to tell us where you're at with that. I'm going to guess it's the industry standard 59 to 61, but I don't know. Maybe I missed it. Maybe they have it on there and I just missed it, but I didn't see it. It would be nice to know, right? I trust that you know, they're doing a good job, but I'd still like to have them listed. The blade stock thickness on this guy is a pretty thick blade. We're looking at 150, probably 160 thousandths. It's a little under that, so it's a fairly thick blade. That doesn't really surprise me too much there. Let's do a hardware check. The nicest thing about construction like this, and this is the part that for some reason there's a lot of people who don't understand. Rike is absolutely flexing here, right? They are definitely showing off. Do we need a knife that's $385 that comes apart back here at the frame for ease of maintenance, which by the way that's the reason for it? No, but I mean, is it? I don't think that's really that hard to understand, the why of this, right? Why? I mean, why are we all of a sudden asking why now? Is this really the line? And is this concept completely and totally lost, right? That things can be made without a complete and total utilitarian, practical, and economic combined function? Do we live in a world where those things don't exist? No, we do not. It really shouldn't be that difficult to understand. But this is a combination of, one, Rike minimizing, the number of steps it takes to disassemble your knife, which there is a benefit to, if obviously we're looking at a much less expensive knife, but there's a benefit to that. There are people that buy and use knives like these, not because they're confused about utility and cost efficiency, because they just want something cooler than a Milwaukee Fastback, right? Again, should be an easy concept to understand. But you absolutely have less parts. You can take the thing apart and you can, maintain it or clean it out much easier. The total steps to getting into the pivot are dramatically reduced with something like this. And it's also created in a way or machined in a way where everything will always go back together perfectly. And I mean perfectly. It is ridiculous, right? But on top of that, Rike is like, look what we can do. Look how crazy this is, right? But I feel like most people who are actually interested in this completely and totally understand. We have seen this idea in less expensive knives before, and truthfully, it should absolutely be something that we see in less expensive knives, because this would be substantially more impressive on something that is actually, not only utilitarian and functional, but economic, right? It's like a pocket knife that you could buy and have be for a reasonable price, and then you can easily maintain it, right? So this is kind of like when you take that idea and just go above and beyond and do it with exotic, crazy materials. And it's really cool. It does make this a little bit easier. There's also always people who say, I've carried my knife for 12 years and I've never had to clean it. You definitely need to clean it is the answer to that. You definitely do. And you are killing your knife if you plan on it, lasting. On top of that, it also varies from person to person. Somebody who carries their knife around and uses it once a week to cut open a box probably doesn't need to clean it very much. But somebody who's out, in the dirt, in the mud and stuff like that, if you're going to do that, which this would actually work really well for, because you have titanium and M390. Titanium's not going to corrode. M390 is going to have a really hard time corroding, but it makes it that much easier to disassemble and maintain for somebody who finds themselves in that environment all the time. So that's not really a good static, covering all bases comment. You should be cleaning your knife. Perhaps we don't need to clean them as often as designs like this suggest, but you should be cleaning it. It's a part of increasing or maximizing the longevity of your tool, right? It's a part of just being responsible with your tool. So this is above and beyond, though. I just want to make that clear. This is Rike going completely and totally out of their way to flex hard and say, look what we can do. And whether or not it makes sense, it is definitely impressive. It's definitely not something that we see all the time. The pivot screw, I think, is probably a T8. It better be. There we go. Yeah, let's take a look here. It isn't. Rike. T6 is not for pivots. It is not for pivots. Don't do that. I've thought this whole time. You know what? It's going to end up being a T7. Let's try this. That is so weird. No, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it is a T8 and I just didn't get it in there. Hold on. This is definitely a T8. Hold on now. Hold on. Okay. All right. I'm wrong. It's T8. The screw on the thumb thing is definitely a T6. 100%. So that's fine. It's just one T8 screw, and it is undoubtedly captive. Or I would, I sure would hope so. Maybe it isn't, though, because when it swings, let's take a look here. Looks like the pivot's captive. Nothing's moving here. So there's some sort of captive system holding the pivot in place so that you will not have a free spinning pivot when you try to take it apart, which would just be brutal. But yeah, this will be very, very easy to take apart and maintain. I think we've kind of driven that point into the ground. Have we covered everything? Yeah. Let's go ahead and talk about this knife. The only thing that I don't like about this design, which is overkill in a lot of areas. Outside of the thumb thing being in the cutting path, which is weird. You could take that off. In fact, do we want to take that off and see what it looks like without it? I haven't done it yet. I think we should. So let's do that. So we're looking at a T6 here. But obviously the only thing that I really don't like about the design is the pocket clip being mounted for tip down. I think the idea behind that is by using the pivot screw to mount the clip, we are further minimizing the number of parts on this thing. And yes, that is the case. But you know what? I think most people would have just dealt with it. You can take that off. That looks a little bit weird, but you definitely don't have to have it there, right? You don't have to. But if you take that off, then there's nothing in the cutting path, and it functions just fine. In fact, can you still use this little area? No, it's just flat right there. But yeah, you can totally do that if you want to. Now, how did this go? No, that would be backwards, right? Yeah, that'd be backwards. That was actually really easy to do. It's just one screw, which is the right way to do that. You definitely don't need to have two screws. Having it go all the way through, I think, is also definitely the right way to go. That thing didn't move while it was on there. It's interesting to know. Sometimes I take these types of things off and sometimes I don't. But with this thumb this mini thumb spaceship that's attached to the blade. For a second there, I thought it was the stop, but it's not. That's right, because the stops are garaged right here. You can see them. With this thing in the way, it's definitely, it's way in the cutting path. I mean, even though we cut at an angle, it's definitely here in the cutting path. So you have to be aware of that. There's no double clutch or anything like that, but it's the pocket clip position. Now, if you just love tip down, which if you didn't know this, I'm about to inform you, you are the minority. Especially, I mean, like when it comes to like surface level, like if you've been buying knives from Walmart and Cabela's, and you know that's as deep as you've ever gone outside of this video, then you might actually, you know, there might be a whole bunch of people who carry tip down. Most of the people who get into this and start to get into some of the nicer stuff, some of the more expensive stuff, not everyone, but when you start to really optimize your knife carrying experience, you find that most people in this territory will prefer tip up carry. Most people will say it's a more natural carry position and an easier, you know, position for the knife to be in when you go to deploy it. But most importantly, the point I always point out, especially when we're talking about a flipper, because if it doesn't have a flipper tab, my honest opinion is it doesn't really matter. If it has a flipper tab, tip down is wrong. If you can imagine here, if you're not an absolute psychopath, you're going to have the knife up against the back seam of your pocket, right? You do not want a bladed object, especially one where the tip is pointing down near the front seam of your pocket. If you carry it that way, change it. Oh my God, why? That is insane. Don't do that. But, you know, for all the other 99.99% of the normal, you know, functional people out there, are going to carry it up against the back seam of their pocket. This is still a problem. Why? Because the flipper tab is also mashed up against that back seam. It is very unlikely that something will bump an object in your pocket and cause the parts to move. But this is the most likely position for that to happen because, again, that pocket clip is in an area where if you move up against something and that something bumps that flipper tab just enough, guess what happens? That blade comes out and is pointed at your leg or your goods, right? I don't care who you are. That's not a good idea. When we have it mounted for tip up, right? Right or left hand carry, the blade's up against the back seam of your pocket. It's being held in place. Whether it has a flipper tab or not, it's way less likely for something to bump you at the angle required to cause the flipper tab to deploy the blade. And it can't anyway because the blade is pushed up against the back seam. I try to explain this every single time I see a knife design with a flipper tab and a pocket clip mounted for tip down carry because it's just bad. It shouldn't be this way. We'll take extra screws. I'm going to go ahead and speak for everybody, I guess. We'll take extra screws. We should have had this clip mounted for tip down. That's my opinion. You don't have to agree with me. If you like tip up, if you like tip down, I'm sorry, we should have had it mounted for tip up carry. I don't like tip down. If you like tip down, that's completely fine. If you're carrying a tip down knife with a flipper tab, you're asking for it. You're definitely asking for it if it's up against the front of your pocket. That is just wrong for so many reasons, right? But hey, it's your life. Just cue the Bon Jovi music. Do whatever you want, I guess. There's my warning. But anyways, yeah. Where are we at here? The look and feel of this knife is incredible. It is obviously made very, very well. It's very comfortable outside of the fact that the pocket clip is here, which really ruins the ergonomics for me. That just drives me nuts. But the look of it otherwise is amazing. There's just a lot of wild machine work here, the angles and bevels and how all this comes together. Honestly, it looks like an integral, and the lines here just look like it's part of the milling. I honestly, looking at this, I would never guess, without seeing this switch here, I would not have guessed that this comes apart. I would just have assumed this is a full-on freaking integral that's just got beautiful lines, right? What's the purpose of the hole here? Nothing. It's just, you know, they did it so that you could see through it and it added a little more character. The whole thing is blasted. I kind of would have preferred a different finish, but it does look good. It's not a cheap blasting. It's a nice, you know, it's a little bit of foggy reflectivity there in the blade, but it looks good. And the edge is sharpened very, very well. Rike doing their typical, you know, cursive labeling here of the blade steel. This is number 112. I don't know how many they made, but this is undoubtedly a limited run. It might have been 200, 250, something like that. The D10, all of that feels perfect. These are garage stops, so you have 2 points of contact, which is very good. This is a steel nested liner lock, which is a little bit, I mean, it's fine. It would have been really cool if they had done a titanium one. But it's fine. Access to it is good. The flipping is just amazing. It's really on another level. Rike knives feel completely different than, you know, something that's, again, 2 pieces of flat titanium with some standoffs. Blade is M390 and being sold for $225, $250. This has a completely different feeling to it, and it is amazing. Even just this piece right here, there was so much care taken in designing this. It's absolutely wild. The pocket clip is gorgeous and milled, right? Really cool. I think it's silly that they put Shadow right here. Just don't do that. You know, the M390 and the numbering on the blade is fine. The RK logo right here, the Rike Knives logo is fine. The Shadow back here is just bizarre, and it's just in such a weird font. It's like a AutoZone font. I don't understand. It's so weird. But outside of that, you know, really great. And again, like, look at all the lines here, the bevels and things. I mean, they could have been way lazier with this and not done so many different things, but they really wanted it to look good. And it keeps a lot of these edges, I think, from being too sharp, right? Really, really impressive. And the jimping on the flipper tab is also good. A nice, satisfying push button flip. Already talked about the action here, everything being completely and totally solid, no movement, no lock stick, no pivot lash, incredibly, just beyond smooth. And here, nice click into the closed position. And then we have, can we see it here? Absolutely perfect centering, no matter how many times I take it apart, it's always going to be the case. I thought for sure this thing was going to come in at over $500. No, to my surprise, they kept it under $400, $385. Which I think a lot of people are going to be surprised and you know, to hear me say this, but I don't think that's a bad price at all. Especially when we think about what some companies charge for the simplest stuff. I mean, take the Chavez 229, for example. I love that knife. I have 3 of them. They want something like $400 for that thing. Or maybe, is it more now? I don't know. That's just 2 pieces of flat titanium and a titanium backspacer screwed together. There's nothing overly complicated about it. I mean, Riat does a great job, and it's a cool knife. It's a great knife, but I've always said this. I love the knife, but it's ridiculously overpriced. That's just Riat going, well, we're Riat, right? And they do make a nice knife, but that thing should be in the low 300s, honestly. $385 for this? Oh my gosh. This is amazing. This is everything I've ever seen from a lot of those $400 Riats, plus the complicated machining, and honestly, it's kind of been refined a bit, you know, over a lot of that other stuff. This is pretty good. It's obviously not going to be for everybody, right? And I don't want to suggest for a second that this is the type of money you have to pay for this type of convenience, right? That it all balances out. It absolutely doesn't. You have to be kind of a knife enthusiast to want something like this, right? You have to, the value of it really needs to be the wow factor, right? And then as a bonus, it's also like, well, if you're going to carry and use it, it is kind of cool that the back frame comes off and you can get in there and do whatever it is you need to do. Most people are just going to do it just to play with it, right? But if you need to, you know, take it apart for any reason, it's going to be easier to do. But a lot of the, you know, what you're paying for is the amount of time it took to machine everything correctly. And absolutely, you know, the wow factor, right? It's different. Rike is doing things that are, you know, that's different than other companies. And, you know, whether or not we need them to, that's completely besides the point. The knife world has always had, this isn't a new thing. Like all of a sudden companies are doing things that nobody needs. No, this is not a new thing. Companies have been pushing that barrier for a long time. They just do weird stuff just for fun. That's what makes it interesting. Otherwise, the knife world would be full of Buck 110s and Milwaukee fastbacks and Opinels. Barf. Is that the world you want? No. Thank God there are crazy people out there like the people behind Rike making stuff like this. This is wonderful and amazing. I don't care if I don't need it. It's cool, right? That's why people are going to pick it up. It's super cool. This is going to go in my favorite knives of all time playlist. I'm not going to put it in my recommended knives playlist because I don't. It's got too many things that aren't necessary for just like a utilitarian folding knife. But if you are an enthusiast and you like the weird stuff, you're probably already aware of Rike, but man, you're going to love this. For those people, I can absolutely recommend it. It's a high quality product and it's got construction that makes it very unique. So very cool stuff. Let's go ahead and wrap this up here. Where is my card? There it is. Thanks again to Rike and Ketuo for sending this in. Please make sure to follow me on Instagram at metal_complex. If you enjoyed this video, leave a like. If you'd like to check out my other content, I do, of course, have lots of videos of knives that are either expensive or inexpensive that I do or don't like, so check those out. And if you enjoy all my content, go ahead and click on that Metal Complex logo right there and subscribe because there's definitely more coming. Thanks again for watching, everybody, and have a great day.